Mirror Mirror is a forgotten time travel teen drama from 1995, a hidden gem of New Zealand broadcasting that has one of the most casually dark endings I have ever seen. I'm Anthony Robin, you can call me Tony, and this is Remembering Mirror Mirror. Mirror Mirror is a children's drama series from 1995, a co-production between Australian and New Zealand TV companies. The show's creator, Posey Graham Evans' original inspiration was the idea of what would happen if you looked into a mirror and saw somebody else looking back at you. The show expanded this idea into a 20-part time travel adventure. The show would go on to receive several awards for children's programming and a Best Up-and-Comer award for Joe Tegan's actress, Petra Gerard. The show was broadcast in more than 50 countries, and despite being fondly remembered, is now available to view nowhere. You can see the first episode on the New Zealand On Screen website, and DVDs were available for a short time, but they're now very difficult to find on second-hand websites. This copy cost me £50 on eBay. It includes all the episodes, but no special features. None of the major streaming sites have the show available. At the time of recording, you can find copies on YouTube, but I'm not sure of the legitimacy of these uploads. The Gibson Group, who produced the show, have a website that pushes you to a New Zealand DVD rental service, so we can only hope that the show is re-released at some point in the future, before it slips further into obscurity. My voice is going. We can only hope the show is given a wider release at some point in the future, before it slips further into obscurity. The success of the show led to a second series in 1997. The follow-up had nothing to do with the original series, beyond the premise of a time-travelling magic mirror. The highest praise I can give the second series is that it is also a show that exists. The first couple of episodes of Mirror Mirror set up the premise, so I'll be recapping them here. Episode 1. We open with a boy being chased through the night. His pursuers have guns and dogs, and just as it seems they will catch him, he's whisked away by a man on horseback. We briefly see our lead character, Joe Tegan, waking up, before we cut to an antique store, where an old man announces to the heir that it won't be long now. Joe Tegan is played by Petra Gerard, who has many other acting roles to her name, including Neighbours and Blue Heelers, as well as two other shows that I may cover in the future, Ocean Girl and Genie from Down Under. The opening credits play, sweeping over a beach which I believe is Shelley Bay in New Zealand, before showing the mirror on a cloudy background. The theme song, composed and written by Chris Harriott and Dennis Watkins, is beautifully sung by Nadine Weisberger. We come back from the credits as Joe's school is getting out, and we can tell that we're in the 90s by this lad's short shorts. In just a few scenes, the show establishes that Joe is popular with most of the students, but she has a big problem. Her mother is a headmistress, and to avoid accusations of favouritism, she's particularly hard on Joe, and this is made worse by Jade Quigley, a pot-stirring, backstabbing little beach. Nobody likes Jade. This is important. At the school's archaeology club, the students are excavating an old well. Joe and her mother argue again, and to maintain her authority, Joe's mum sends her home. Joe's mum, Catherine, is played by Judy McIntosh, who would go on to play Mrs. Pevensey in Disney's Narnia movies, amongst many other acting credits. Jade Quigley is played by Lisa Jones. When Joe arrives home, all fired up about how her mother treats her, her dad takes her out to try to calm her down. He explains calmly that Catherine is under a lot of pressure in her new job, that the whole family had to relocate for. But Joe is still frustrated. Joe's dad is played by Peter Bensley, who's known for having recurring roles in Water Rats and Neighbours. Her dad is looking to buy an old typewriter to help him get over his writer's block, and the hunt for the typewriter leads them to respected elders' antiques. The old man who runs the store listens politely to Joe's dad, but is paying, quite frankly, too much attention to Joe. He insists on giving Joe an antique mirror from the back of the store. Not only does he give her the mirror, but he comes to their house to position the mirror exactly correctly in her bedroom. He declares that the mirror must be kept in this exact position. Joe and her parents are confused by this, but not concerned, although they should be. If this wasn't a TV show, there'd be only one reason why an old man wanted to put a mirror in an exact position in a teenage girl's bedroom. Kids, if an old man you don't know ever installs a mirror in your bedroom, call the police. Later, Joe looks into the mirror and sees not her reflection, but another girl dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Joe tells her parents and her brother, but since they can't see anything, they think she's imagining things, except her brother Royce, who thinks she's crazy. Royce is played by Jeffrey Walker, who also played Bronson in the second series of Round the Twist, and has gone on to become an award-winning director. Seeing the girl in the mirror again, Joe tries to communicate, and when touching the surface of the mirror, her fingers dip through. The other girl is called away, but Joe manages to reach right through the mirror and finds herself on the other side. Reading the girl's diary, Joe realises she's travelled back to her room in 1919. Joe explores the house, eavesdropping on conversations but keeping herself hidden, giving us a quick introduction of most of the characters from 1919 before Joe slips back to her own time. But Joe's brief step back in time has caused a drum to appear in the well at the archaeology site, even though she has not changed anything yet. So the timeline in this show is something I will need to talk about later. The next day at the archaeology club, Jo is talking to her friend Tama. Tama is played by James Ashcroft, who has continued acting as well as writing and directing. Tama is very scientifically minded and thinks that Jo was just dreaming. Everyone at the dig site is excited about the drum, that everyone except for Jo remembers always being there. Now remember how I told you that Jade is an unlikable beach? Well, the show goes to the point of making her almost irredeemable. She throws a crowbar down the well, luckily missing the two kids, but she ruptures the drum that sprays Jo's friends with a noxious green liquid. The two kids are hospitalised, and Jo's mum comes home that night to tell them that things are bad. Jo's dad tries to reassure her, telling them this was an unforeseen accident, it's no one's fault, and I have some thoughts about that I will talk about later. Anyway, the two kids are receiving treatment in an isolation room, but unless they can figure out exactly what was in the drum, the doctors can't cure the kids. The only thing they have to go on is the drum's date stamp, 1919. On hearing this, Jo assumes something she did in the past led to this accident and runs off sobbing that it's all her fault. Jo throws herself onto the bed, and the episode ends with the girl from the past appearing in Jo's bedroom to comfort her. The closing credits are an instrumental of the opening theme song. Episode 2. The girl from 1919, Louisa Irondale, has come through to 1994. Louisa is played by Michaela Benass, who went on to have an extensive acting career, including roles in Round the Twist, Neighbours, and another of Posey Graham Evans' creations, MacLeod's Daughters. The girls spend a few minutes showing Louisa some cool stuff from 1994, like hairdryers and boy bands. Jo explains about the drum of poison, and the girls decide not to keep time travelling so they don't make things worse. Louisa returns to 1919, where she's late for her lessons with her highly strung tutor, Mr. Frid. Frid is played by Stephen Butterworth, who has lent his voice to several seasons of the Power Rangers, amongst other roles. In 1994, Jo goes to visit her friends in the hospital, along with Tama. Trying to explain to Tama about the mirror, Jo gets the idea of travelling back to 1919 to prevent the drum from being down the well in the first place. Tama, being very logical and scientifically minded, doesn't believe Jo about the mirror, not even when she disappears in front of his own eyes. So he removes the mirror from its exact position on the dresser to examine it more closely. In 1919, Jo scares the bejesus out of Louisa's little brother Titus. Titus is played by Jason Gascoigne, who had a few other child acting roles, including The Tribe. Titus runs to get his mother, Primrose Irondale, played by Michaela Amos, whose other work includes The Elephant Man and Holly's Heroes. Titus's mother tells him that there are no such things as short-haired ghosts. After they leave, Louisa finds Jo hiding in the wardrobe, and Jo explains to Louisa that she wants to try and stop the barrel from ending up down the well. Louisa agrees to help and begins by lending Jo some period-appropriate clothing. They rope Titus into helping them and use him to distract the enormous dog next door. The dog's name is Bullseye, and I believe he's a Great Dane. The girls find nothing down the well, but they're caught by Louisa's neighbour, Sir Ivor Creevy-Thorne. Sir Ivor Creevy-Thorne is played by Nicholas Hammond, who among many other acting roles was one of the Von Trapp kids from The Sound of Music. Sir Ivor politely, but coldly, tells them off for trespassing in his garden. Jo tries to tell him that a drum of poison may be put down his well, but he's not interested. He tells Louisa he will be informing her parents about this intrusion onto his property. But as soon as they're gone, Sir Ivor is on the phone to another gentleman. He tells him that somebody was looking for drums of poison, someone with connections to Joshua Irondale, Louisa's father. Sir Ivor reminds the gentleman that it's his job to keep Joshua Irondale out of their way. Sir Ivor does come round to see Louisa's parents. Her father is played by Joe O'Brien, whose other roles include Wurzel Gummidge Down Under. They are surprised to hear about the vulgar, forward, short-haired girl that their daughter was playing with. On returning to his house, Sir Ivor finds Nicholas, his ward, waiting for him. This is the boy from the opening of the first episode. Nicholas is played by Nicholas Hooper, and this seems to be his only acting role outside of an episode of Blue Heelers. Nicholas, the character, not the actor, wants to meet the girls that he saw in the garden, but Sir Ivor insists he must be kept hidden for his own safety. Smash to credits. And so we have our setup. By travelling back in time, Jo has caused the drum of poison to appear in the well. Throughout the rest of the show, she'll be travelling back between 1919 and 1994 to make sure the drum of poison doesn't end up in the well. This is a time travel adventure, based on cause and effect, with what you do in the past affecting what happens in the future. It is not a time tourism show like Doctor Who, where they have self-contained adventures in a set time period. It's more like Back to the Future, with various characters trying to affect the past in order to get the outcome they desire in the present. The show is very plot-driven, with characters always moving from one attempt to change the past to another, or having to deal with a setback or hurdle to their current plan. The plot does slow down occasionally, mostly for our two female leads to have heartfelt moments with their parents. But for most of the runtime, the plot moves along swiftly, with the characters always moving from one action or predicament to another. They have various adventures in both times, including breaking Joe out of a women's prison in 1919, researching for vital clues in a library in 1992, and facing every teenager's biggest hurdle, their parents. Both time periods have a larger cast of characters, who are either pulled into the girls' adventures or directly influenced by them, which leads us nicely into the many subplots of this drama, and I'll cover a few of the major ones here. The biggest being Nicholas, the mysterious boy next door. At the start of the show, Sir Ivor insists on keeping him inside, claiming his poor health means he cannot venture out safely. Throughout the show, Nicholas either has to escape from his room or be rescued from it by the girls, with Sir Ivor becoming more controlling of him with every escape until he finally admits that Nicholas is his prisoner. Halfway through the show, we find out that Nicholas is the last surviving Romanov, the Romanovs being the former royal family of the Russian Empire. This would make Nicholas, who is really Alexei, the new Tsar, if it wasn't for the revolution. Nicholas is distraught to discover that his entire family has been murdered. He had been told that they were being kept safe, as he was. The execution or murder of the Romanovs is a real historical event, and there are many works of fiction based on the idea of one or more of the family surviving. These stories mostly focus on Anastasia, so it's nice to have one that looks at Alexa. The whole story of the Romanovs is fascinating, overlapping with World War I, the Russian Revolution, and even a necromancer. But going into it in detail would be too much for this video. In Mirror Mirror, as well as helping Joe and Louisa, Nicholas has to find a way to escape Sir Ivor before he is sold to the Bolsheviks. Speaking of Sir Ivor, he is the main antagonist of the series. While he is posing as a respectable gentleman and claiming to be an entrepreneur, he is actually some kind of dodgy mercenary, with his fingers in a lot of less than legal pies. He was paid to take Nicholas out of Russia, but now he is planning on selling him back to the Bolsheviks, something he must have been planning for a while, as they arrive towards the end of the show, and it is not a quick trip from Russia to New Zealand in 1919. Additionally, he is working with corrupt government officials to dump toxic waste in the bush, one of which will end up down the well in 1994. We, the audience, know that Sir Ivor is up to no good, but as he has money and the appearance of respectability on his side, proving his involvement with the drums is going to be difficult for Joe and Louisa. Louisa's father is a good and honourable man, working for the government health department, and because he loves his daughter, he does look into the weak rumour about the poisoned drums. But we all know what happens when one good man tries to do a good thing in a corrupt system. In 1992, Joe's mother is fighting to keep her job as headmistress, as the chairman of the school board, Jade's mother, pushes to have her removed. We get the impression this has been going on since before the start of the series, but the accident with the two kids and the drum has given them the perfect excuse to get rid of her. Before the accident, the only complaints that the school board seemed to have were the modernisation policies that Joe's mother brought in. Things like allowing girls to wear trousers, something that was a bit controversial in the 90s. My own primary school made the local paper in the 90s when it didn't allow the female students to wear trousers. After the accident at the dig site, the board has a vote of no confidence in Joe's mother, and she is removed from her position. And yes, in my opinion, she absolutely should have been. Despite what Joe's dad says, this was not an unforeseeable accident. Since Joe first went back to 1919, the drum of poison has always been down the well, and the side of the drum is marked with a skull and crossbones. If the drum was always down the well, with the big poison symbol on the side, then yes, Joe's mum was absolutely negligent in letting the kids anywhere near it. Being fired from her position would be the least of her problems. Throughout the show, Joe's friend Tama and her brother Royce are trying to find a way to neutralise the poison in the drum. Luckily, Tama is some kind of genius, and he manages to narrow the neutralising agent down to one of two compounds. He may have been able to narrow it down to one, but he gets a little distracted when Louisa Irondale comes to 1992, and he's clearly crushing on her. Finally, we have the old man. After giving Joe the mirror, he seemed to know exactly what would happen with the drum. He knows that Jade Quigley was the one who burst it. For the rest of the show, he blackmails her into doing his bidding. His constant blackmailing of a teenage girl does not make him any less creepy. He uses Jade to move things around, tell characters things at certain moments, and generally influence the outcome of events. The show's central premise all hinges on the mirror. The mirror is the portal between times in the show, and has certain rules for how it works, some of which seem to be a little fuzzy or convenient for the writers. Using the mirror, the kids can move between the two time periods, but the time in both years moves at the same rate. So if an hour passes in 1919, the same amount of time will have passed in 1994. So the kids can move between the two time periods, but they can't go back and redo anything that goes wrong. And they can't go further back or forward to times they've already been in. If you try and take something through the mirror that already exists in the other time, it won't let you. So no duplicating keys or other items. Louisa is only able to travel forward to 1994 because she died in 1974 and therefore doesn't exist in the show's present time. In order to be able to pass through the mirror must be in the exact same position in both times. This is why the old man was so concerned with lining it up perfectly in Joe's room in the first episode. This rule becomes a major plot point in various episodes of the show. Joe becomes trapped in 1919 when her friend Tama takes the mirror to school to examine it in 1994, and in a later episode in 1919, the mirror is stolen and put on a train. In 1994, Tama has to work out the relative speed of modern trains so that Joe can travel back to 1919 as the two mirrors' positions cross with each other. The slightly weaker rules of the mirror are that only children can pass through. No adult ever manages to throughout the whole series. And also, you have to believe that time travel is possible in order to be able to travel through the mirror. This last rule particularly just seems convenient for the writers, as it staggers the character's ability to travel through time, with only Joe and Louisa being able to travel through the mirror initially, and other characters gaining the ability as it becomes convenient for the writers. So this is a good show, but the timeline of the time travel doesn't make sense if you think about it. First of all, the appearance of the drum. The drum doesn't appear in 1994 until Joe goes back to 1919 for the first time, but the first time she goes back to 1919, she only walks around Louisa's house. She doesn't even know about the drum at this point. Nothing she does on that first trip would make the drum appear. After the drum appears, and she goes back to 1919 to stop it from appearing, everything she does leads up to the drum appearing in the well in 1994. But she only goes back to stop it from being in the well because it was in the well, and it's only in the well because she went back to stop it from being in the well. So how did it get in the well in the first place? Maybe the answer lies with the mysterious old man. Right at the end of the show, we find out that the old man is Nicholas. Shocked face. He remembers Joe coming back to 1919, and now he's trying to manipulate the timeline so that he can reclaim the Russian throne. The old man has had 75 years to plan out this week, and claims to have thought of everything. He even created Jade Quigley to do his bidding. Yes, the old man, Nicholas, introduced a school cleaning lady to a rich client of his, so that they would have a child who he could use to manipulate during the events of this week. The old man's idea all culminates in Jade going back to 1919 in order to make sure that they use the right neutralising agent on the poison drum. The drum also contains Nicholas's ring, which proves that he is a part of the Russian royal family. He intends for Joe to come back to 1994 to retrieve the ring from the now neutralised drum of poison and take the ring back to 1919 so he can reclaim his throne and rule Russia with Joe as his Tsarina. Okay, fine, a good villain plan. Couple of things though. We already know that Joe can't take the ring back from 1994 when the neutralising agent has worked, because she can't take something through the mirror that already exists in the other time, and the ring will still be in the drum in 1919. Even if he did get the ring back, the Russian Revolution has already taken place. There's no way you're getting your throne back, Nicholas. Best you can hope for is political refuge with Uncle George in Great Britain. And none of this explains how things would have happened the first time round. If Joe hadn't been looking for the drum of poison in 1919, they wouldn't have met Nicholas. And if they hadn't met Nicholas, he'd have ended up being sold back to the Bolsheviks. And Joe's only looking for the barrel in 1919 because Jade Quigley bursts the barrel in 1994. But Jade only exists this time around because Nicholas created her. Old man Nicholas even says she wasn't there the first time through. But old man Nicholas couldn't have created Jade if he'd been sold off to the Bolsheviks. And Joe would have never gone back to 1919 looking for the poison barrel if Jade hadn't broken it in 1994. And if Joe wasn't looking for the poison barrel, it would have never ended up in the well because Sir Ivor Creevey would have just dumped it in the bush with the rest of the barrels in 1919. So there is no explanation for how the drum ends up down the well in the first place. All of this is me being nitpicky. It's honestly not a deal breaker. We all enjoy Raiders of the Lost Ark, even if nothing Indy does in that film really matters in the end. And the great part of Mirror Mirror is watching the two leads play off each other, interacting with the other characters and having adventures in 1919 and 1994. All of which leads up to this show's weirdly dark ending. Tama makes the neutralising agents. They use the right one because Jade Quigley travels back to 1919 and makes sure that they use the right vial. They use the correct neutralising agent, so in 1994, Joe's friends are never hospitalised. Hurrah! Nicholas realises that he can't get his ring back, so he decides to stay with Joe in 1994. So Nicholas doesn't spend 70 years brooding about his lost throne and the teenage girl he once met. The old man disappears from the timeline, and as the kids are walking through school, they ask if anyone's seen Jade. But nobody's even heard of Jade. But the cleaning lady they walk past laments that if she'd ever had a daughter, she would have named her Jade. And the last shot of the show is our heroes cheering that Jade Quigley never existed. This show ends with the lead characters celebrating Not even the death, but the complete erasure from existence of a 13-year-old girl. And this is considered a happy ending. Jo Tegan literally went back in time and changed the past so that her greatest enemy would never be born. Jo Tegan is a Terminator. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you watched Mirror Mirror back in the day, I hope you enjoyed this brief recap with me. And if you haven't seen the show, go and watch it, even though I've spoiled the ending. It's really, really good. Just, I don't know where you can watch it legally. If there's a great old forgotten kids show that you remember, comment it below and maybe I'll do an episode on it in the future. If you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye-zy bye.